Once we had decided that we wanted to examine news media framing around a civil liberties controversy, and this had been a goal of ours for some time, and in quite a stroke of luck for us, it was announced, the KKK announced that they would be holding a series of rallies in southern Ohio and actually in some other Midwestern towns. We then started to tape the local news. We were hoping, we didn't really know how the local news would be covering and presenting these rallies, but we taped the news, we looked at the news stories, we ended up with probably about half a dozen news stories covering different events. And fortunately for us, one event that happened in a small county south of Columbus, Ohio, two local news stations opted to cover the same event using very different news narrative stories frames, and exactly picking up on the values that we thought they would, in part because, again, they're important values that are inherent in these civil liberties controversies. So one station emphasized really the free speech component of the rally. They showed the KKK members speaking, they showed protesters speaking, counter-protesters with signs that say things like "no free speech for racists." The interviews that they chose to put into the story were all of individuals who said that they came because they wanted to hear what the KKK had to say. Another local news station, using, by the way, some of the same exact footage, or very similar footage, chose to package the elements of their story around a public order narrative. So they emphasized not only the potential disruption, but one man held up a metal bolt that someone had thrown at him. There were images of police that were there to make sure that both sides were relatively peaceful. So, much to our delight, these local news stations took the same issue, the same exact event, but framed them in very different ways. We then embedded these news stories within a slightly longer newscast. That is, we used some other footage from the local news stations and put it in a commercial. The preliminary stories were exactly the same for everyone, but then half of our participants in our study saw the free speech version of the news frame, and then half of them viewed the public order version of the news frame. After that, they completed a survey, and we asked them, among other things, whether they would support the right of the KKK to protest and to rally. And we also included some other questions so we could try to determine if the media frames impacted levels of tolerance, what kind of mental processing was going on to produce that result.